I'm Miranda Rake.
And I'm Sarah Wheeler, and this is The Mother of It All, where we take on motherhood through the lens of culture and culture through the lens of motherhood.
Good morning, Miranda Rake.
Good morning, Sarah.
What's the haps?
Okay, I have two things I'd love to chat with
you're
you
ready.
about, and they're totally different, and so it's like a choose your own adventure for you today.
Okay. Am I gonna fall off a cliff? Because you know what I'll do then. I'll just go back to the last decision and save my own life. Okay, tell me, what is it?
Okay, so would you rather hear a little bit about the most life-changing massage I've ever had, or would you like to tell me if you've considered leaving the country in the last 2 months?
Ooh.
Like permanently? Which adventure?
This is hard, and of course, like my ADHD brain is always looking for connections. So I'm like, could this be one topic? I feel like I know there's more layers to the massage, and I feel like you're labeling the experience kind of conveyed to me. Like I could kind of feel in my body when you said life-changing. So I think I got that, although I'd be happy to receive a voice memo later, or some kind of interpretive, dance to express that. Let's talk about leaving the country.
Okay. Wait, let me give you the TLDR just because I want everyone to have it.
Yes, I'm guessing. I don't know. I mean, I've only known you for a couple years. I'm guessing when you asked that question, your answer was yes.
Well, I guess I'm excited and I want to share the question that she asked me.
Are you leaving us?
No.
Oh,
she was like, okay, so
wait, who's she? Are we talking about the massage therapist?
I'm giving you the TLDR of the massage.
Oh,
before we talk about leaving the country.
Okay, this wasn't a real choice.
No, it is. I realize I have to share this. Okay, so she's washing my feet. That's how it started. She's washing my feet.
Okay, I did want to hear
I'm talking about caregiving,
so
and supporting my mom through some stuff and supporting my kids always. And she's listening and washing my feet. She goes, I just wonder who's witnessing you. I was like,
you're like, you are, foot lady.
All right. That's just the beginning. But let's talk about leaving the country.
Miranda Rake, I am witnessing you.
Through the massage, I thought about that and I was like, other moms.
If you washed your feet first, I would wash them again ceremoniously. I don't want to do like the cleaning aspect, but I would do like the anointing kind of thing. And I give a mean pedicure.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm really good at doing people's nails. Just, I don't know. That hasn't come up for us.
That's a skill I wish I had.
I have offered myself to a friend for her daughter's 12-year-old birthday party to like do manicures. And I think I'm going to get taken up for it. And I think I've finally reached my birthday party utility zone because I cannot do face paint or balloon animals. But yeah, now they're old enough that I have something to offer. Okay.
So leaving the country. So have you considered, how present is that idea for you?
Honestly, it's not really. And I will tell you the only reason why, that I have a big family and I love them very much. And I have a little baby niece who, I'm trying to like take care of my digestive tract for. I'm like, do it for Rosie.
Yeah.
Do yoga for Rosie so you can be around to buy her first drink in 21 years. That's the only reason. I just like anytime I kind of get into that fantasy, the family pulls me back. Although I do have a lot of anxiety that like, I don't know, somewhere between 10 years to 10 days from now, I will no longer be able to fly across country to see them. Miranda, have you been thinking about leaving the country?
I don't know. Yes, I go all over the map. But yeah, I mean,
Literally.
I think at the root of this question is the realization of what a bizarre moment we're in and how it's really hard to see, which I think is part of what's like the strategy, like intentionally.
Yeah.
It's really hard to know how bad is it?
Right,
what
right.
is
It's like the
happening?
frog and the boiling water is like,
Yes.
yeah, you
Yes.
always read. I'm not trying to be flip. I know we're like doing this in a little introduction chitty chat. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, I feel weird bringing in very intense things. And I'm like, this is actually what life is like. So, I really do like, I read accounts and I've been paying extra attention to this of like people in Nazi Europe, right? And like that you're always like, why didn't you go? I would look at like the history of
Yeah.
other Jews and be like, what? Like your mom literally had like someone gave her tickets on a steamship to America and she was like, we're good. And then like, a year later they were interned. And now I have some compassion for it, like some understanding for how, like you said, how hard it is to see how bad things are, and I think that particularly there are lots of people where that things are, way more urgently worse for too. And that's what's weird too, is that depending on who you are in America, you're like that kind of life-changing horror is closer or further
Right.
away.
Who
Yeah.
you are and where you are, right? Like I
Yeah,
realize
right, which has
being
always
in
been true to an
Portland,
extent, but
like people want to come here, right? Like I realize that I'm in a place that people are relieved to arrive in,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
I am like, oh, but I have been very proud of our city for the way they've shown up in this moment, being
Right.
under his radar, like we talked about before. Just so that's
That's
helping
my
me
other
hold
thing is
on,
like, right, is how can what's the difference between being like, I'm going to stay put because, I just got to, take care of my kids and we have a spelling bee tomorrow and whatever, versus like and that's all valid. And, we're talking today about how like parenting matters even in the face of like big things like art and, totalitarianism. But also, how can you stay put because your community kind of needs you? Like I am thinking, how could I be really of value with my presence, versus just being like a sitting duck?
Yeah, right. It's
Yeah.
really there's an allure, and I think there's an allure of like another place where you think about it could be different. But it's still hard and there's no perfect answer. I just think it's worth
Yeah, I mean,
asking once in a
you wrote
while.
this piece about mothers moving to Europe and these kind of like services that are helping people do that, and it's like both easy to be like fantasize about that and also to roll your eyes at it. There's so much privilege and I don't know. I mean, I struggle. I think, even before, let's say, I mean, I think things have been shitty for a while. And again, they're shittier depending on who you are. But like even before 2020, I thought about, and certainly before the second reign of Trump, I thought about like, even with my city, like that that it could be better in some ways for my individual children if I went somewhere else, but it isn't like, I don't feel like it's honest, real. I don't like.
It's tricky, right? And it's guessing, right? Like we're guessing. There's so much guessing and you don't really have no one can tell you, right? Like no one can jump ahead in your life and say like, this is the right move. Like this is the one that will make everyone
Yeah.
happy and
Yeah.
your children will be mentally healthy, well-adjusted adults if you just do this. And it's like, so
Yeah.
there's no one to tell you that. And I think that it reminds me a little bit of, we've talked a lot about like schools
Yes.
and
Yeah.
thinking
I'm
about
thinking about
that conversation,
those
right? Like
analogies.
our children, like is my kid is not thriving in his school right now. And so I'm in like that limbo.
Yeah. When do you go?
But he's also like with
For
his
who are
friends.
you making
Right.
decisions? Yeah.
And for what? Like what's my goal? Like
Yeah.
what am I reaching for um and why and that's a little micro maybe
Yeah, yeah, the
version of this.
communal versus individual decisions, we've talked about choosing schools that like your presence benefits the community in some way or at least like engages you in it rather than opting out in order to kind of give your child a more optimal experience. I think when you say, I have never articulated this before, but I think when you say the phrase around giving your kid like you didn't say this, but something like, you know, a normal childhood so they're well adjusted, I think that's less in my control than it's like ever been for parents. And I just think that other than the, you know, protective factors maybe of like wealth and privilege, I just don't think like we're in control of that. I think that we have no idea what the world is going to look like in 10 years. And I don't know if I'm trying to do that anymore. Like I want my kids to be sane, good people who feel resourceful, but I don't think that the old visions of like what you're doing in childhood so that your kid can have a certain adulthood, I don't think if they were ever true, I don't think they stand anymore. So I guess
Yeah.
I'm over that.
Congratulations. That's good.
This morning, I'm sorry, did I say right now? I meant right now.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
it's even
And
like the college savings question. I was talking to a
yeah,
friend
I
about
don't,
that, who I think of as very together and organized. And I was like, do you have a 529? She's
yeah,
like, no. I was like,
there isn't.
okay.
I keep being like, there's not gonna be college. It doesn't matter.
That's
Yeah,
what we basically were talking about. I was like,
yeah,
this is bananas. I
yeah,
mean, and
it's,
yes, like
yeah.
not like your bananas, like it's so bizarre
Yeah.
that
And
this is
again, it's a
happening.
precariousness that I think, especially in this country, most parents live under more than you or me or our parents did. And I don't think anybody deserves it. And I'm sure it's shocking even when you're kind of more used to it. But there's also a part of me that's just like, yeah, life is precarious for a lot of people. And now I'm kind of feeling it more than I ever thought I would.
Yeah, there's that kind of like that, like
Mhm.
this is unprecedented. And then I try to think of like the long view of human history, or
Right.
like even the idea of leaving the country. It's like, well, people move, like this is
Yeah.
people, that's humans, right? Like we move around. And I think we try to do something better for our kids. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
ancient, right? This is an ancient
Right.
practice. And so
Well,
I
yes,
think,
and many people in this country have already moved and fled
right,
places that weren't, they've already made that decision before. They've been through that of like,
right.
no, when do you pull the trigger of this place isn't safe for my family anymore? And
Hmm.
basically I'm going to put my life on the line and, and go to the States. And so again, it's like, I think this is new to you and me, but
Right.
it's not new to a lot of people. And so
For
it's
like
like,
all of history, right? Like this is
yeah,
just, I think
yeah,
that
but
comforts
also
me,
right
right? When I'm
now.
like,
But
oh my God. And they're like, no, this
yeah,
is human. This is being human.
yeah,
This is like the human history
yeah,
is like this,
right,
right?
right. And so how do you like not let that fear or like, if I'm being honest, that kind of like, I don't know if it's entitlement, but that kind of like shock at like, but me, but like now but now I'm worried about like, literally having actually no money. How do you not let that turn you kind of further inward? And how do you kind of use it for something that again, like makes a better society? Just in a
Mm-hmm.
tiny way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh boy.
Sorry.
I thought we were talking about a massage,
Sarah, you
and just
chose
like
the
a
adventure.
vacation to Paris. I did go I want to bring our guests on, and
Yeah.
I just need to give a shout out to Regina at the Be Relax Spa in the LAX Southwest Terminal,
Oh.
who actually, I mean, there wasn't like a basin of water, but she did take a wet
Mm-hmm.
towel and wrap my feet in it
Oh,
and then massage it. And the whole time she talked about her cats. And
beautiful.
it was definitely some kind of spiritual.
Yeah. I
Great
mean,
use of 10 minutes if you're ever in LAX.
you can do
Highly
a lot with a
recommend it.
hot towel,
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
just would say like,
And a good attitude.
yeah.
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 Like when you fly to Japan, maybe
I don't
other
know.
airlines do this
I've
now, but
never
like
flown to
long
Japan.
ago I flew to Japan, and like when you land, they give you these like
Oh, yeah.
hot
Mm-hmm.
towels,
Yeah.
and you like,
Yes.
and you're just like, I'm a new person. It's
Yeah.
like all you
Yeah. Like
need.
the steakhouse. They do that.
Oh,
Yeah. We'll talk about steakhouses next. Okay. Today, because we have solved the existential crisis of parenting that is 2025 in the United
Check.
States. We
Yeah.
are ready to talk about motherhood and creativity. We want to talk about how those forces fuel or constrain one another and how we navigate life as mothers who also want to make art or artists who want to mother. And we've got two great conversation partners for this topic. Christie George is the author of The Emergency is Curiosity and the Practice Substack, which focuses on, and this is her phrase, this is Christie's phrase, small, weird projects. It's just a beautiful term.
Sarah.
She's also, and now
Rose.
this is my phrase, what I would call a mistress of creative interests. So we can unpack that more today. Welcome, Christie.
Thanks for having me.
And Jihii Jolly is a journalist and writes the Substack newsletter Time Spent on craft, care, and technology. And she also helps facilitate Mothers in Art and Design, a community for mothers with a creative practice or those who wish to reclaim one, which I appreciate. Welcome, Jihii.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jihii, who's caring for your kids right now? You have a little one, right?
I have a 20-month-old who
Who's little to me.
His father is taking care of him because he has hand, foot, and mouth disease.
Oh, you got that HFM?
Yeah, we're in our first experience. Otherwise, he would be in daycare, but everybody else at daycare also has it. So
They all have it. And there's like nothing you can do. They're just touching everything.
Yeah.
What level do we have like mouth sores? How horrifying is it
No,
today?
honestly, like we've been really lucky. It's been fine. He didn't have any mouth sores. We thought he had drool rash. He's been happy eating. I just feel bad that I think he gave it to the other kids.
I love that when you're like, my kid's patient zero. Yep.
Someone had to.
Yeah.
Exactly. Someone has to be that parent. Yeah, I've been there for sure.
Yeah, I hear it's a rite of passage, so here I am.
Welcome. And Christie, who's caring for your boys right now?
The great state of California's public school teachers. They're in school.
Do you want to say a little bit about it's not like a one-room schoolhouse, but about their cute little school?
Yeah, they are in a cute little school with 60 kids total, K through 8. So a very little country school. And it's our local public school. And it is just a really sweet environment for them. They love it.
I always imagine them like that in the redwoods, like that the school is perched within a redwood.
It is. There is
Like
a
a
redwood
foxtail.
grove on the property, and it's really beautiful. We're
That
20
sounds
minutes from the
amazing.
ocean and in the woods, and they're a little feral and happy about it.
Can I come there? Can I move
Come,
there?
everyone can.
Instead of
Yes,
Canada,
right?
maybe?
Yeah, fuck
You don't
Canada.
have to go to another country. You can just come up to the Russian River, which sometimes feels like another country.
That sounds great.
I
I'm
feel like
coming.
your school too, correct me if I'm wrong, has like they have utilized the old people volunteers in a way that I wish more schools would. Like, don't you? They're like
Like
some older
grandparents?
people, yeah, that support the school.
Yeah, I hadn't articulated it that way, but
I wouldn't say that around them. Maybe
The
I should
wise
say
elders.
the wise elders
wise
of the
elders of our
community.
community.
Yeah.
But we do have a lot of friends who are grandparents taking care of their grandchildren as primary caregivers. So that is one piece of it. And I think one thing that I'm really interested in, and that has happened the last couple of years, is we're also trying to get more people in the community. There's a lot of retirees here locally. It's kind of a vacation place. So there's, I think, less people with school-age children and more people who are retired, and trying to figure out ways to have them feel invested in the school also. And people, do come out. This is a very country school kind of thing, but there was a running of the goats like about a month ago across the bridge so that the goats could, it was for fire mitigation, like eat the grasses in an area. And, the whole town came out. It was lovely.
That's awesome. Sounds
Yeah,
very cool.
there's, as our public schools every day become more under threat, like I have been thinking about with some folks, like how do you get people who don't have children to kind of see the local public school as like a civic resource,
Totally.
and a space for kind of connection. So that's really cool. Maybe goats have something to do with that.
I'm convinced now all you have to do is invite goats to any event, and it really brings people out. Like people
Just takes the edge off.
I haven't seen in years came out of their house because they heard the goats were coming.
Wow.
So
I feel like
that's
in our district, it's the smoothie bike that brings people. If you have the smoothie bike where someone's
Yeah.
on the bike and it churns the blender and a smoothie is made, like you're getting double the attendance at your event. But so both would be, I mean, could we handle it? I don't know. Well, I'd love to hear from both of you about how you came to be interested in this topic of motherhood and creativity. Jihii, maybe you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm just like I'm a baby mom still, So I'm figuring it out, but I think it's just been integral to my honestly to my fertility experience. So by way of context, my background is in journalism, but I always have had sort of a tenuous relationship with how I feel about the role that journalism has played in society. And so over the years, I was sort of inching my way toward writing and just feeling like I wanted the space to write about whatever moved me and not be doing journalism in a traditional way. And then when I got married, we unexpectedly had a pretty long fertility journey. It took us 4 years to conceive our son, ultimately through IVF. And that process, just like I had to turn to writing in a way that I hadn't since I was a child and, journaled about the secret feelings and all that stuff. And so when I finally had my son, I think I was in a mental space of just really like turning to art and writing to process life. And I was new to San Francisco at the time. I moved from New York to San Francisco like 3 years ago. So I had no friends. And then all of a sudden I had a baby and I was like, I need to make friends. And postpartum, it's like pretty easy to make mom friends because everyone's on maternity leave and you can join all these mom groups. And so I had a very like sweet postpartum experience. But then once people started going back to work and I moved neighborhoods, this like feeling of, maybe you guys know the meme of like you have your mom friends and you have your friends and then who's in the middle of the Venn diagram where your like interests are the same and you're not just friends because you're parents.
I don't know the meme, but I 100% know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And there's like very few people in the middle of that Venn diagram. And I just really felt like, no, there have to be people out there. And in San Francisco especially, it's such a creative city. And so long story short, I just started meeting people quite randomly and I met this mom. WhatsApp here is huge. So the WhatsApp mom communities are out of control. There's like hundreds of people in every neighborhood. And I met a mom who said she organized this group for mother artists and designers. And I became friends with them. And since, I don't know, maybe like the last year and a half, almost my son's whole life, we've just been doing these like monthly meetups. It's sort of like a support group / book club for mothers who are artists of all kinds. And so that Venn diagram kind of got filled out. And I started just feeling it's not just my personal practice anymore. I'm not just writing for me and doing the work that I'm working on for me, but like this can be life. Like I can model life as art for my son, and this is both my job and kind of how I feel like myself, if that makes sense. So that's how I got into it.
Yes, it does. Yeah, and I've seen you. You've written some really like relatable, beautiful, and also super practical pieces on your Substack about that kind of, tension or just relationship between practice and professionalism. And can you talk a little bit about your exploration of those dual concepts?
Oh, wow. I could talk a lot. I'll try to give you guys a short version. So, it started with journalism. So journalism is a profession, But I think as I was working in newsrooms and kind of on the news cycle, I started to feel like this is the problem. Like the container in which we've put the practice of reporting, interviewing, telling people stories, gathering facts is what is making the output not actually serve anybody's well-being. You don't need a 24-hour news cycle. But like the container just basically broke what is actually a beautiful practice. And so that's where the idea sort of started sitting with me. Like, what if I viewed journalism as a life practice instead of as a profession? I got into it because that's what I liked. You know, I was like a naive teenager who thought it was cool to just interview people and write about the world and all of that. And then you like get a job and the job has all these constraints that are business oriented, you know. So I started to just feel like, you know, what else in life should be a practice that isn't necessarily seen as a profession? And maybe there are things, you know, that have become professionalized over the years that are not really served well outside of obviously like economic reasons and scaling professions and stuff like that. So that's where it began. But then caregiving became the next big, okay, so this one, like everyone's actually talking about. I don't have to, I mean, you guys and your listeners all know, you know, just the insane lack of understanding about the value of caregiving in so many different ways. And so I, after leaving journalism, started working for this organization called the International Association for Feminist Economics. And so they are economists all over the world who actually study the value of women's work in the global economy, especially unpaid labor. And I felt like, okay, intellectually, I'm all on board. Like, care matters, and it should be counted in a professional way that is actually giving, you know, its due. But at the same time, in my body, when I'm doing care work in my home, I can't get myself to feel the same productivity high that I get from paid work. Like my brain and my body are on two different pages, and I'm like trying to get my body to feel like that thrill of like filing a deadline or whatever, but it's not happening when I'm doing laundry or I'm like caring for a sick kid or I'm, you know, supporting parents do
Just
something.
me saying this is a profession doesn't make it feel that way.
Yeah, or this
kind
is
of.
valuable, or yeah. But yeah, so I think I just started just writing a lot to try to unpack it for myself and realize that there's a gray zone between practices and professions, and in caregiving you see it a lot, and in art you see it a lot, because if I pay a nanny to do the exact same thing that I'm doing at home, she has a job, but if I do it at home, I don't have a job. It doesn't make any sense. And that kind of extends to many things. So I've tried to just use that lens to approach my own time creatively and do a bunch of little experiments with my own schedule to like kind of get my body to feel motivated by the things that I'm doing that are practices like art and caregiving and not professions. So yeah, that's just a little bit of how I started writing about it.
Yeah, that seems like very, very valuable, both for yourself, and you don't have to take care of other people in your own like professional practice journey, but it's a bonus when you kind of create like a, you know, I like the language that you use in your Substack of like, I think you say, you know, it's not like rigid rules. It's just like a couple structure, not rules.
Yeah.
To create some kind of guideposts or questions other mothers or caregivers can also be asking themselves. It's quite a gift. So thank you for that. Christie, how did you get here to be somebody who is, I would say, you know, just on this like amazing, you know, speeding freight train of the motherhood and creativity discourse?
Yeah, in my case, it happened more accidentally. At the beginning of the pandemic, I found myself coming back to this book that I had read the year before, which is Jenny Odell's How to Do Nothing, which I loved when I first read it. I read it when I was on parental leave with my second kid. So I think I was in some liminal space to be able to absorb its ideas or something is the only way that I feel like I can explain it, because I can't really even remember being able to get through reading a full book, except that I did read that one.
Yes, very impressive.
And yeah, I'm impressed with myself.
I would like consume the words of a book, but I wouldn't say it was reading. It was
Yeah, right. I can't even picture being able to like
digesting.
flip pages while
Yeah,
holding a
totally.
baby, you know?
Yeah.
So I
No.
have a lot of questions for myself about how I even managed to read it in the first place. But I did find myself coming back to it. For those who aren't familiar with the book, it's a nonfiction book about the attention economy and ways we might be more intentional with our attention. And I found it to be so wildly relevant at the beginning of the pandemic, particularly in the kind of lockdown phase and quarantine time. And I started copying quotes from the book that I liked and that I wanted to remember. Um, I find now in particular, if I don't write things down, I don't remember them. And especially during those early days when in our family, I was doing 4 hours of childcare, and then 4 hours of like paid work, creative work, whatever your time. And I just really loved the time that I had copying down those quotes. And then I started uh, making really bad drawings to illustrate them. And then I started doing watercolors. And it was the first time in my life I had a creative practice. I wasn't someone, my background is as an impact investor. And I've worked in media, but I did not ever have a creative practice before. And I felt like someone had just like given me this like secret life hack or something that made me more present and that was like just like really pleasurable and fun. And I didn't really know why I was doing it, but I kept going with it and ended up with 200 of these handmade pages in a cardboard box that I eventually bound into a book and then did an exhibition in part to show people that they could also exercise their attention without being a capital A artist. And in doing that, I have learned in retrospect that the project is a lot about motherhood and creativity, although I would not have said that when I first started it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is both what I have learned in reflecting on it and what I've learned in sharing it with other people. Um, in sort of the recognition that they have. It's like a Rorschach test or something. When people see the project, it's in a limited edition, so it's not like it's very widely out in the world. But I often have the experience of someone who is a parent and a mother in particular saying, "This book is about mothering," um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of what has like led me down this path of trying to understand the intersection of mothering and creativity and trying to expand what I read and write about it beyond just, um, you know, fair play decks and thinking about mothering as an obstacle or something to be overcome, which is a lot, which is real, but also I think there's more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, Jihii, I know you've talked about mm, artists like Ruth Asawa who like have brought their motherhood kind of into their art, perhaps accidentally like Georgie. Sorry, I often refer to Christie as Georgie. I'm trying to be like formal for the audience.
We're
But
professional here.
but I know you can call me Wheeler if you want. But and I think that's really interesting because it does break down the dichotomy. And I've seen some examples. I wish I could cite who these artists are, but I'll try to put them in the notes. But an artist who every day during the pandemic with her toddler just took like a tablespoon of her toddler's Play-Doh and made something different out of it, made like a different mini sculpture out of it. And then, would have 30 of those over a month and turn those into a photograph. And I I find that really compelling. I mean, I actually have, so I got to be along on this journey with Christie of seeing how this project evolved because we're part of a small kind of creative group that it's interesting formed in the pandemic to kind of support each other's creativity. And, like Christie, I was also a mother who was like, am I creative? Am I an artist? I think I have to do that now because it's the pandemic, but like that's not an identity I have. So we saw each other build those identities. And I think it was many months before we started talking about motherhood. And I wonder if that does come from this desire to keep those things separate, right? Like you have to have your profession and then your kind of home life. Or if we were trying to hold a space where we could talk about other things. Uh, but I do have a show and tell, one of the pages from Christie's books. There's a beautiful photograph of the river by Christie's house, and it says, "Provide no deliverables." And I keep this in my office. Is that a Jenny Odell quote, Christie, or a you quote?
No, it's a it comes from a Jenny Odell quote. Um, and it's imagining an idea of art um, as something that would not have anything to do with deliverables. I think I might be butchering it, and sort of doing something for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, can I say something? Just
Of course,
it's
say lots of
fun to
things.
it's fun to hear. I'm just kind of suddenly the macro is becoming clear in my head listening to you guys talk. But it's funny because I wholeheartedly agree with this ethos that I love Danielle Dell's book as well. And just like do art outside of profession. Just like do it because you're a human being who feels something or is moved to do something. And that's what I always thought art was prior to having a child. But now that it's become this dance between caregiving and art, because I am the primary caregiver for my son, and it became like a negotiation of my time. And every time I took time away from directly caring for him, whether I had a nanny or a friend or a relative or whatever, I would feel this guilt of like, but I'm just going to go do art. This isn't okay. You know, I feel like I had to turn the corner back to the land of deliverables and be like, what can we borrow in terms of structure from the world of work that allows us to feel like it's important without the capitalism and the economic exchange? Like, how do we protect time and model to our family members and our kids? I am serious about this time, and there actually are impacts from me investing my time in writing or reading or taking pictures or whatever I'm doing in that time period that are actually going to then invest back into the wellness of myself and my family. All of that is borrowing from the world of work, you know, like there's inputs and there's outputs and there are deliverables, but they just don't have to do with money. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm still figuring it out, but it almost feels like this full circle that you make with fresh eyes, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I absolutely, I noticed, your resistance, Christy, through the course of this like multi-year project to turn it into, for really a deliverable, right? I mean, to make it something that, for a while you were like, I'm just going to carry this around in this box, like you described everywhere I go, and I'll just show people, and that will be enough. And then I saw you kind of organically and slowly, I think, desire something else. Can you talk about that and how it relates to, what Jihi's bringing up about, do we come back around to deliverables, and how do they look different from the ones that we might have kind of automatically assigned ourselves in order to justify creativity?
Yeah, I so appreciate what Jihii said, because I think it's not, first, it's like not as binary as we imagine, surprise, surprise, or something. And um, that point about kind of coming back to the professionalization of it feels really very real right now for me, because I'm out of the making part of it. Now I'm in the moment of, I've made this thing. I've sort of decided, actually, I do want to share it with people. And then the question becomes, how many people? How do you find them? Who do you ask? What do you ask them? And as someone who is new to the process of, I don't know, book promotion, marketing, like words that I think feel sort of icky in the language of like practice and any of the sort of more, I don't know, soul-centered words we might use for
Yeah.
creativity. Like
Yeah.
I'm in the business of a book now. And all of that has to do with like professionalization. It's easier if I knew it would be easier if I knew what I was doing. And but one thing that feels different about at least the way I want to do it, um, is I want the deliverables to be more collective. That's the part for me that's like related to our conversations about caregiving, or even the school conversation we were having earlier, is that I personally am genuinely less interested in just me talking about this project. I'm sort of interested in what happens when the project hits someone else's consciousness and then what they make back in return. And so I'm sort of stumbling through how to make that more concrete. More practically, it's looked like instead of me just doing a talk about my book, can I host a conversation about mothering and creativity with a bunch of other people so that we're kind of collectively generating something that wouldn't be possible on our own with just our own ideas. But I think it's so important to be kind of honest about all sides of it, that you can both make something just for yourself. I'm sure I wouldn't have made this thing if I thought I was going to be trying to get it out in the world. There's
Right.
no, I think I would have been paralyzed by
Yeah.
whatever that meant. So for me, the like making it just for myself is like critical to its making. And now I'm not actually just making it for myself or only interested in it for myself. Like I think there's like, that would feel like, it would feel false or something to pretend that that was true. But I'm not actually sure what it means concretely to get a book out there. And I think it probably does have to do with something about what Jihii was talking about that line between the personal and professional that I'm still trying to figure out.
I think also when I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking about how, I've been a writer my whole professional life, but the motherhood was a catalyst for a different kind of creativity for me. And I think, motherhood it's a act of creation. I mean, you create a human being and you kind of grow a new self. As we talk a lot about matrescence on this show, and like that
We love matrescence.
we love matrescence, and you have to build a new identity, right? Your brain is rewired, your body is changed forever. You are more closely connected. Many of us are to what an animal we really are. That we feel connected to this other self, and I think if there is time, um, which there's often not, right? We do have creative energy that we want to get out. And so when you give, there's studies about giving mothers who are freshly postpartum, a time to do art or a class in art or music or whatever, and how that can be healing just to give you a way to express what is new and what you're feeling. And I think part of that creativity, like, is if it's about expressing the experience of motherhood or expressing something that, at least in our contemporary culture, we often experience in isolation. I think some of that impulse is related to a desire to connect. I have felt that, it's like I'm trying to say something about this experience that's so
I
hard
feel less
to define
alone in it.
Yeah, and I want to connect. I want other mothers to like see it and nod, or other parents or whatever. And I'm thinking a lot about that, whether it's professionalizing your work or if it's that you kind of have to do that in order to connect.
I feel
I
like
don't
it's a
know.
little of both. And to your point about the like giving mothers some kind of creative outlet postpartum, one thing I forgot I did this, but when I was 2 months postpartum, I took like this virtual workshop with the writer Amanda Monte.
Oh, yeah.
She wrote
Friend of
Touched
the
Out.
pod.
Yeah, so yeah, she's amazing, and she did a workshop called Embracing Interruption, and it was for writers. And I was like, at that time, I had this like blob strapped to me, and I was like at my standing desk, like listening to her encourage us to see the domestic as, inspiration, and to see the art at home, and also to really reflect on what does it mean to be interrupted in your creative process, because that's like the exact opposite of all of the artistic advice that you receive as a man or before you have kids. Like, you're supposed to be chasing deep work and put 3 hours in every morning. It's like not at all real.
Going to the cabin in the woods, food under the door. Yep.
Yeah, but it was just refreshing to be able to think about, oh, I could do this in 7-minute bursts, and then I do a couple burps and feeds and then come back and do 12 more minutes. Okay, like, let's do it.
Well, and I think that the boredom of motherhood, right? Like the boredom is for me was you know, the baby days were pandemic days, and I was often very bored. And then when I got a minute to myself, I would just scribble out this little poem that was just in my head, and it would just burst out into this. I texted them to myself. And like, then so they would spill out in probably like 2-minute bursts. And then after he was asleep for the night, sometimes I would copy and paste that from my text messages into a text edit doc so I could remove the formatting, realize this is bananas, and then like stash them in a folder. And I have hundreds of those.
That's so
And
beautiful,
I
Miranda.
still don't know what I'm going to do with it, right? I'm just sitting on this, but I think the fragmented nature of creation, it's okay, right? You can just, like, if you've got it to say, just say it, or if you've got it to paint it. And I'm curious kind of in that way too, like, what is the structure of your creative life? What enables that for you? Like, I think there's so much frustration for a lot of parents. It's like, I can't, I work full time. I've got my baby, I've got my husband, I've got my 2 babies, I've got my whatever, how do you squeeze it in? What enables your creative life?
Can I go back to one thing you just said? Because I really loved your example
Yeah.
for 2 reasons. One is that it shows that it's possible to do something in the 7-minute bursts. So I think we need more examples of not the cabin in the woods and not the 3 hours and not the 2-month-long residency, because otherwise it just feels impossible. So for me, that example is helpful. And then the other thing is around the motherhood aspect of things being so generative. Like those poems were possible because of either the boredom or the caregiving, and trying to figure out how we make that time and space for ourselves is, I think, only possible by hearing lots and lots of examples from other people. In my case, I think it's important to be honest that my project would never have happened were it not for the pandemic. I don't think I would have been able to give myself the permission to say that spending an hour copying quotes from a book and doodling about them was like worth the time. I have a different perspective on it now, but I think when I was working full time, I would not have given myself that. So that time was critical for me. Now that I am in a kind of different moment of life, the primary thing I make for myself is time in the morning for morning pages before my kids wake up. I mostly swear by it because it's the like thing that I know how to do. And I've like figured out a way to make time and space for myself to do them. But I'm always looking for other ideas. So I'm eager to hear what Jihii does in terms of structure and experiments that she referenced and what you both do.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with everything you both have just said. My experience is a little, I don't know if I was going to say it's unique. Maybe it's not. Let's see. But um, I, so I am the primary caregiver for my son because when I was a child from around 1 to 3, I didn't live with my mom. I lived with relatives. And so it was really important to me that like I'm going to be with my child until they are 3. And that is the deal. And so fortunately, I have the privilege of having my partner pay for our home and things like that, but not for childcare. And so my approach had to be very, very step by step because I think I was summoning the courage to pursue art as work that deserves somebody else taking care of my child. And I just didn't have the guts to do it all at once. So I had a very complicated caregiving system where I just basically added childcare one day at a time, step by step over a year. Like I had a nanny on Monday, then I had a different nanny half a day on Friday, then I did 1 day a week of daycare, and eventually landed on now, having like about 4 days a week of childcare usually. And in those time periods, I think honestly, it was a very big struggle between, do I spend this time doing stuff that looks like I made progress? And that for me is just like feed the kid, get the groceries, walk the dog, find the next thing, research how to get him to eat solids, whatever. And I felt very drained at the end of those days because I was like, now I had time to myself. And yes, I showered maybe even did a workout, maybe even took care of the house, but I just don't feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
So I started experimenting by adding in like an hour of uninterrupted writing time, or I am just going to read before I do any of these other things. And I realized that like an hour or 2 hours of creative work is kind of enough to fill your cup. Like, I don't actually want to sit there for 8 hours writing or doing art or any of those things. So I basically had to like scaffold my care. Scaffold my childcare. But the other thing I had to do was subsidize it. So being very practical, paying for childcare, like I freelance still, as a researcher and a journalist. And so it was a dance of like, okay, this project is going to give me like 50 hours of childcare. And then that 50 hours, how much of it am I investing in, for instance, I'm working on a book now, like in book writing versus home stuff. And it was just a lot of convincing myself to spend the money on my art. And then once that ran out, I had to do more freelance work. So chaotic, but that's kind of what the last 2 years have been like so far.
Mhm.
But I do
Mhm.
appreciate the difference between that and these narratives that we have, again, about what committing to art looks like, right? Like you overhaul your schedule and this and this, or like Christy said, you go to the residency. And I think, Christy, it was you who shared with me this organization called Residency in Motherhood, where they have you kind of design your bespoke, quote unquote residency within your daily life, and they show different examples. Some people are like really doing it 8 hours a day. Other people, their residency is, 30 minutes of my kid's nap time, 3 days a week. I'm going to be working on this, this fiction book or something. And so, like you said, like seeing those examples are so beautiful. I appreciate for you, Jihii, you've kind of listed out in your writing some of the things that you think about, like I'm thinking back to Miranda's poems, as good things to do during nap time or a similar thing, right? Like short workout, read a chapter of a book versus like when you have childcare. And I appreciate that. Also, I appreciate you including drive somewhere alone as one of the options.
That's good. It's interesting too. Like, I just want to, I think it's hopefully obvious, but I was in a group of mother writers recently and of various ages and stages in their careers. And I expressed frustration that, I can't get it together to even sketch out a book idea. And like,
Yes.
I just am like, I'm never going to write a book. That's whatever,
Right.
and this other mom, I think her kids are in high school. And she was like, how old are your kids? I was like 4 and 7, so I've been a mom for like it's getting up towards 10 years. And so it feels like a really long time. And, and she was like, that, you got so much going on. Like there will be space later and you don't need to worry about it right now. Like now is not the time. It doesn't mean never. And it was, I think that was like so huge to hear. Like I almost started crying right there. It was like, I think just because there isn't time now, it doesn't mean there will never be time,
Yeah.
That is
And so I
so
think
true.
I just want to like make
The
space
arc
for
of
that.
parenting is long.
Yeah. So if you don't, if you have the impulse now and you don't have time, it could even just be sometimes my poem notes were like literally a poem about, I would text myself that idea. And it was
Yeah.
like, so I have
That
like,
was the creative practice.
yeah.
Sometime I want to write a poem about this thing. Yeah,
Mhm.
I like how small that
Mhm.
is.
It can be so tiny and like
Jihii,
save it for later.
You've talked about these cultural beliefs that lead to kind of guilt around creating art, particularly when you're a parent. Um, I didn't know if you wanted to speak to that just briefly.
Oh my gosh.
Brief,
Still
just
battling all of this.
yeah.
Yeah. Some of the stuff that I touched on in terms of my own experience, but I think, again, writing helps me process things, and also just making friends with other mother artists and talking about this stuff really crystallized. Like, you know, we we don't view art as work that matters. It seems frivolous. It seems like a luxury good. It doesn't seem like it's essential to an individual's well-being or a family's well-being or a caregiver's ability to care well. And so there's so many other things like that. how you spend your time. Like at least as a freelancer, every hour is worth a certain number of dollars in my career. Like I charge a certain number of dollars for an hour of my time. And
Yeah.
then to think about taking an hour to like do something random and artistic, I'm like, did I just lose this much money? Like, should I have spent it on that instead? So I think just a lot of the beliefs about like what is worth our time. Also like taking care of your kids. I think I've now started to understand that like there's many types of caregiving for your own child. There's direct care, which is the literal, I am watching my child, I'm in the room with them. But if I pay somebody else to do the direct care and I spend that hour doing something that's going to feed the fact that they're going to have neighborhood friends on the block because I got to know my neighbors with my free time, that's also caring for my child, So I just like unlearning some of those things that are in our heads. And yes, I've written about this. And just replacing those beliefs with, maybe my mom or mother-in-law or grandmother, didn't feel that like she needed help. I think that's a big one. Like she did it. So why do I need help? Because I already am more well-resourced than the generation before me.
Ooh,
And
that's
realizing
a
that,
big
well,
one.
looking if they were to reflect on their lives and have this space to really honestly reflect, how fulfilled are they? Do they feel good about their health? Do they feel good about their creativity? Maybe not, and that's come up in our discussions in the mothers in our group, like, women encouraging their moms or their older sisters who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s to take up an art practice. And like, there's just this closed, heavy door of like, it's too late. I don't know how to start at this point. So it's important to start whenever it occurs to you that you might like to start. I think that's another big one.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Miranda and I had our moms on the podcast for Mother's Day a couple years ago, and one of the things the kind of the delightful surprises in the conversation is that they both do have art practices. Miranda's mom does calligraphy, right, and painting, and my
And
mom does
painting, yeah.
quilting. And my mom has a studio now, an artist studio that, she's been working her ass off and raising 4 kids her whole life and didn't do that until her 70s. So
It's
it is
interesting.
inspiring. And you're like,
Yeah.
don't wait. Why wait?
Well, and it's
Yeah.
funny that it's still right. Like now my mom is caretaking for her partner who had a big surgery, and um she has been working. I've been so proud of her because she's been trying so hard. She signed up for this continuing painting class that she likes to take. It's like Chinese brush painting.
She's really
And
good.
it's really, I love it so much.
You
And
don't
she's
have to
really
be good, by the way, for it to be worthwhile, but she
no,
is.
but I love it. And it's like this nature study. And it's been so cool to see her prioritize that, even as she's got really demanding caregiving responsibilities right now. But she texted me the other day that because she was like, I really need to sit down and I need about 3 hours. I have to get all my brushes, all my paints, and I have to like set up my still life. And then she's like, I feel like I get it set up and he needs meds or he needs lunch or he can't reach his water or whatever. And so she's like, I really need like 3 hours. I really do. And but she texted me the other day, he took a nap and she was like, I'm painting.
Amazing.
And I just thought like it never ends. There will always be something interrupting. Man, I mean,
Yes.
yeah.
One thing I feel compelled to say too, Christie and I have talked a little bit about this too, is I think going back to the idea of practice, like I'm a child of immigrants and my mother-in-law is also an immigrant. And I think for them, I can't generalize to everybody, but like to get your nervous system in a place that you are open to spending any of your free time on something like art for someone who's dealing with the pressures of whether it's immigration or other life experiences that kind of don't have never conveyed to you a story that your well-being and fulfillment matters. It's so hard. And I think for that reason too, like I feel like I don't know what I'm doing as an artist or a writer, but I'm trying to build the muscle while my kid is young so that the muscle exists in my body for when other pressures emerge in life. And then the first thing I stop doing is art or creativity, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So just want to throw like, yeah, there's something about like the fact that she even knows she wants 3 hours. That is so wonderful that I wish for more women who don't even realize they need it.
Yeah.
Christie, I know
Yes.
you've written and I've heard you speak about, the relationship between this discourse on motherhood and art, which, like, of course, there's not as many books about it as there is about the Civil War. But, like, for those of us who are looking for it, there are conversations. You review a lot of great books on your Substack, Jihii, and, like, there is stuff happening. But, you have talked about how much it kind of leaves out mothers of color. And I wanted to know, how you see that and what you think is particularly important, other than, reflecting people in any space in bringing mothers of color into this conversation.
Yeah, I think of it as, for sure, I'd love to be reading more um, accounts about mothering and creativity by mothers of color, but it extends across so many axes of
Yeah.
difference. It's like I want to read more. I often use the example of disabled mothers because
Yeah.
I'm an able-bodied person, and it's both that the discourse is more interesting, but also I am like getting so much out of it. And so while I think of there being like a moral argument or something for there being more diversity, I'm also just like bored by reading the same
Yeah.
story, like in the same way that Jihii was referencing a sort of like deep creativity. There's so many creative books out there that talk about this concept of time that just doesn't exist in my own life. Like
Mhm.
it's like the sort of lone artist in the cabin whose, mother is doing his laundry or something like that, and so is able to generate the books. That's not my life. And so just as I've been bored by the creativity discourse that is so homogenous and really doesn't seem to reflect what a caregiving life um, that also is a creative one might look like. I think that a discourse that is so culturally homogenous that
Yep.
doesn't include all different kinds of mothers or people that are doing mothering that don't have their own kids. Like, I sort of don't always understand why people aren't as bored as I am, so that we would like actually, do something different. But that's part of my interest is that I think that in um, kind of diversifying the discourse, we will all be better off.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's something that's very compelling. And I've certain like when you talk about, disabled folks, that's very relatable to me that like I've learned a lot about my own mothering just in general, not even getting into creativity from like disabled mothers. And I I yeah, I'm thinking too about no, I lost my thought. I lost it. It's gone.
Well,
It's
I was
gone. Somebody
thinking,
pick me up. Gee.
well, as a
We'll
writer,
come
I just
back.
want to like, do you save like I'm sure you do. I mean, I think about mother artists, that I look to. Like, what is their practice? What was their output and when? Like, when did, whoever um I talk a lot about like I think about Ursula Le Guin a lot because she's from Portland and her husband worked with my mom and so there's a little bit of a personal connection and um they had 3 kids and she was like I don't know, the greatest science fiction writer of her generation. It's just like, how, and I was reading about her life and I did the math and I think she was 38 when her first book came out, I
Yeah, she
think,
was kind of like
which,
older. Although now, like, I used to look at these like residencies and grants for writers over 40 and be
yeah.
like, that's wow, yeah, they need it. And now that's me.
You're like,
And I'm
I
like,
need it. But I think
I could still start a career.
to be
And you can.
later, right?
And you
And
can.
thinking about like 38 was different back then too,
Yeah,
right? Like
right.
38's like 50 now.
Sure.
I don't know. I
Yes.
just
At
trying to kind of
least.
allow for some like maybe there's no rule about what you do when or what you produce when and kind of I'm wondering who you both look to. I mean, obviously you're carving a little bit of your own path, which is part of why you're here because you both have these interesting practices and intentional practices around creativity. And I'm curious, just, yeah, who do you look to, or what is your roadmap? Or do you feel like there even is one for you?
Do you want to go?
Go
Should
ahead,
I?
Jihii.
Either of you.
You
Know,
just
it's
say each other's names at the count of
Yeah,
three.
yeah.
No.
yes, Christie. I look to
Christie George.
Christie.
There you go.
Jihii is
No,
my muse.
Well, there you go. And we're done.
I was just gonna say, you mentioned her a little bit earlier, Sarah, but just in case listeners are not familiar, definitely in our group and definitely for me personally, the person who like opened my eyes to the possibilities of the intersection of art and motherhood was Ruth Asawa. And for folks who haven't read the book Mother Artist by Catherine Ricketts, which is like every chapter is about another artist and another dimension of just what it means to be a mother and an artist. It's so good, but particularly the Ruth Asawa chapter, which is all about ambition. I think that was the moment I was like, oh, I can be ambitious as a mother artist. Whoa. Like I had no idea, but what am I trying to be ambitious about? And what she was ambitious, she was an artist a Japanese American artist, sculptor in San Francisco. And she basically did all of her art at home, and she had a bunch of kids and
Six.
Yeah, 6 kids. And she was a steward in the art community as well. So she was very kind of ambitious about not only the work that she put out, but like bringing people together and making her home a gathering place. And I think just seeing a vision of someone who had 6 children, worked out of their house, and then her kids were like involved in her work. And there are so many exhibits about her work that you can see. There was just a retrospective here that closed, but yeah, there's many books about her. I highly recommend looking into her life because you see that her kids were part of the process. Like they're scribbling their drawings in her notebook as she's drawing in her notebook. And she invited people in. So I think it's kind of like what Christie was describing earlier, that like lone artist in the woods. She's basically the exact opposite of that in every single way. She's a woman artist with children and community in her house in a city. And I feel like that I was like, oh, goals. That's what I want to do with my life.
I took my daughter Jihii to that exhibit at the SF MoMA, and I think I did like way too much of trying to make that explicit. I was just like, look, her motherhood informed her creativity, but you don't have to be a mother, but you could, and it wouldn't necessarily keep you from she's like, can we go to the gift shop? What are we? What about you, Christie?
I was just going to say, just to pick up on the Ruth Asawa thing, I learned in that exhibition that Ruth Asawa was one of the co-founders of Scrap in San Francisco, which is this amazing, like, warehouse of just junk and paper and crafts and art supplies and all for dirt cheap. And for me, it's like, I had no idea. It's a place that I've gone many times, but I didn't know that she had any relationship to it. And since learning that, it feels like yet another way that it is not the lone artist in the woods. It is also that we are going to like create this container that allows other people to participate as well. So that for me is like, that's the goals of that, again, is to figure out a way to move both care and creativity from the individual to the collective.
I love to, Christie, I just got to add, you have this piece that talks about, kind of facetiously, the 10 easy steps to become what you call it, this phrase you use a lot, an art shark. And I love the last one is tell everyone. Is like, just tell everyone. And to me, it's like, that's almost the first step of community, is like, even if you're not sure what it's for, or you're kind of ambivalent about defining yourself, tell people you're making your art and then see what happens.
My part of my own practice, now that I use words like practice with a straight face or something, is that I write fan letters to people.
Yes,
like
this is what I mean, that you're a mistress of interest. You get like, you were like, I'm going to do fan letters.
Yes.
And you got like obsessed, and then you got other people excited about it. I wrote a fan letter.
It's like, for me, I like them because they're a really easy way to practice. Like, I read something someone wrote and I liked it. And usually that feeling really has nowhere to go. I don't really post on social media, and a lot of the tools we have available to us, like I don't really restack yet, and or whatever they are. I don't really understand them. I don't do them that much. But what I can do is like find their email address and write them a note. And these letters get more and more unhinged. They're more like notes to self than they are notes to the person.
You don't even know if they're going to read it. It's like,
yeah, you don't know if they're going to read it. Half of them don't respond. But then every now and again, like I get a response, and that connection that is made for the person that can absorb these emails is amazing. And it leads to all sorts of things, including like me meeting Jihii. That came from an email
A
that
fan
someone
letter?
wrote to me.
Yeah.
oh, was she mentioned her or made a connection?
Someone saw my book in a bookstore, wrote me a letter, and because I had expressed interest in this intersection of motherhood and creativity, she said, you have to meet Jihii. So Jihii and I have never met in person.
Yeah,
We don't know each other, really.
we really don't, but it feels like we do. And I feel like, everything that Christie says and does, I'm like,
Yeah. Virtual relationships
we've been talking
are
about
real.
this lifetimes ago.
Yeah, I did remember what I was going to say before too, which is that just talking about representation and like a diversity of stories that I think, Jihii, you write a lot about AI. And I think one thing AI is a lesson we're learning is like people like being in an echo chamber sometimes. There's something very comforting about it. I don't think it makes us very interesting or helps us grow. And I think we're seeing now like how toxic that can be at its extremes. And so I don't know, it's interesting to think about trying to like complicate the discourse on caregiving and art. Even just by calling it caregiving, I think we invite in a lot more voices, right? As kind of an antidote to, echo chamber driven division, which is being, encouraged in us right now.
For sure.
I've been thinking about this a lot as it relates to AI, in part because I ended up using Claude to sort of generate a sort of difficult email correspondence recently, and it was so validating. And I sort of feel like I had the experience for the first time of like how tempting it would be to be validated all the time. And I think that has a lot to do with the sort of homogeneity of the discourse. And I have realized that, like, although it feels good temporarily, I'm not interested in validation. I'm interested in liberation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Oh my
snapping
gosh.
that one.
Yes, heck yes.
Can we just touch on making art about your kids? This is this
We'll just touch on it.
we'll just touch. This is a conversation I am constantly tracking and having such a range of feelings on. And I have you both here. Miranda and I have talked about it, writing about our kids and, how much we do that. There was this piece by Parul Sehgal in the New York Times Magazine a couple weeks ago about the new book from Sally Mann, who is a photographer who took kind of famously some pretty exposed pictures of her children, and kind of a rash of books by the children of artists about, how kind of used they felt by their parent artists. And I just have so many feelings about this because, I mean, if we are saying that we're inviting the intrusion of caregiving in art, I get worried about us judging artists who include their children in their work too much. Any thoughts on that?
I have some thoughts. So on a personal level, I mean, my child is so young, but I'm currently working, kind of my big project right now is I'm working on a memoir about our fertility experience that's sort of about questions on how periods of waiting and liminal space is a time you build foundations you didn't realize you needed. But he's like one of the main characters in it. And he, from the time before he was born, there's like conversations between me and an embryo in the book and then me and an actual person. So this is, I mean, it's not the same as what you're talking about, but the way I've been thinking about it and the way that I try to approach, I think it kind of speaks to art in general. The way that we've been talking about it is, I actually think it's one of the challenges or the issues of art as what's the fulfillment of my ego that makes people maybe not so aware of representation even of their own family members. I think it, like in memoir at least, extends well past children. It extends to all of the difficult people in your life because that's what memoir is filled with. And I think if it's just about putting a piece out there because you are fulfilling yourself and trying to, establish your artistry, that's very different than I am trying to model what it looks like to use creativity to metabolize life in a way that creates value for everybody, because the decisions that you make are going to be coming from a different place. So that's like, I hope, I mean, I'm obviously like being private about identity and stuff like that, but I hope that my son and future children will see anything that I create as this sort of like process of alchemy and not, voyeurism, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think you're getting at something that keeps popping up for me over and over when I hear, various people talk about it, is that there's like a kind of trickiness, and it's something that's particularly tricky, right? Is that, thinking back to Miranda's amazing massage at the top, like we all want to be witnessed. And when I am writing about my children, I want to be witnessed, but I also want to witness other people, right? I want people to feel seen by seeing my stories. And I don't always think I can do that without including some of my children in that. And so there is sometimes, not much thought and sometimes a lot of careful thought about, what value does this have externally? And of course, I'm thinking about my children kind of feeling exposed, but they're also kind of, I think, too young to make that judgment. Christie, any
I've
thoughts? You want
been,
to
yeah, I
absolve me
haven't.
of my guilt?
I don't know if I can absolve you of your guilt as much as just sit in the question with you.
That
I have
works too.
no idea how to think about it. I have pictures of my children in my book, but my book is also in such a limited release that it doesn't feel so exposing. Um, and they are at an age where they kind of like seeing the pictures of themselves. It like makes them feel famous or something like that. Um, that said, I probably am someone who wouldn't write so much about them as much as my sort of own experience of mothering. And I do think there's like a difference between those things.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
and, I'm also interested increasingly in the personal, and people can't write about the personal without writing about actual people. I write and read a lot about attention, for example. I'm interested in it. That's sort of what Jenny's book was about. That's certainly what parts of my book are about. And the conversation around attention in general is so abstract and so academic, and in this register that I just find so boring, honestly, usually. And so I've been thrilled when I hear kind of thought leaders or big thinker people talking about parenting and caregiving as a site of attention and talking about their actual children, because it also feels so much more relatable to me than kind of abstract ideas. So I don't know
Yeah.
how we should do it.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of my tension. Like this author of this New York Times piece is a career journalist who has a magazine job, and she adds this coda to this article where her kids ask her, "Do you write about us?" And she says, "No, I don't." And it gives me kind of this tinge of annoyance, like, oh, I'm just like a kind of second class mom writer because that's not my career, right? I'm somebody who started writing about motherhood. And that is like my content, is that it's personal, right? And that there's it's true. I'm not always interested in that writing, but there's also like a professional privilege in being paid to write about things that are not
Absolutely.
personal, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I think my take on it for what it's worth is, and I think it gets more complex as your kids get older, right? And
yeah, my sister used to kind of blog about parenting, and then she stopped as her kids grew older. And I wish, part of me, I wish she'd found a way, because that witnessing that she does is so well done. Anyway, go on, Miranda.
Well, and I think sometimes, like, it's just important to ask the question, like, over and over again, and not be done. Like, not make up your mind, and to keep thinking about it. And you can change your practice if you realize you were doing it in a way that maybe wasn't respecting your child's autonomy and the fact that they're too young to really give consent. I mean, I think we have to accept that, right? We have an unbelievably intimate knowledge of another person, and they're not old enough to give their consent for us to share what we know. And so that's really so important. And I think I'm glad you brought it up, Sarah, because it's just so big. And so constantly vetting my work for the line between what is my story and what is their story, what is mine to share and what is theirs. And I think for me, it's like, if it's really obvious, like, like I wrote a little silly Substack thing about, I mentioned like that this coyote stole the soccer ball at soccer practice. I don't think
really?
that's like,
I didn't read that. That's amazing news.
It was amazing. That's like,
although I'm worried about like the ecological, implications.
There's some coyote issues here. Or it's like coyotes have human issues.
Right.
But
thank you. Yeah.
But we, like, it's so important to interrogate it. And I think that sometimes.
Wait, we're interrogating the coyote soccer, or no? Or like, can you talk about it?
You could.
Can you? You're saying.
I'll send you the video.
Should I tell this story about my kid's experience?
Yes, and I think that we can sometimes be, I don't want to say lazy, but it's kind of easy, right? This huge experience of loving our children and kind of looking at them is often easier than like interrogating more deeply into ourselves and like going deeper in those layers there. And how could we tell the story with the focus really truly on ourselves, and to kind of take it off our kids a little bit. Seems like a good creative practice. It's kind of like writing a poem in a form.
I love to focus on myself.
Yeah, well, right. But it's hard too, right? Like,
well, we were talking about containers at the top, like, Jihii talking about the container of journalism as a profession, kind of not really actually matching what's meaningful to her about that work. So thinking about, the containers for our art and our expression and what we communicate. It's interesting.
One really quick thought, actually, I love what you said, Miranda, and I think that to be able to switch lenses, because I think what you're saying requires us to be able to not just be looking at our kids and then looking at our work and being like, I'm going to put this out based on what I observe, but like interrupting that with different vantage points. And I actually think that doing art side by side with your kid, I'm learning, is like one of the most incredible ways to just totally mess up the playing field in like a very generative way, because they do observe us. And then my kid is only 20 months old, right? He's tiny, but already like yesterday he took a bunch of books out and I was like, oh, you want to read a book? And I started reading the book and he's like, no. He gives me a book, takes out a book. Then I'm like, you want to read this book? No. And he basically wanted both of us to sit side by side and quietly read books, because he's seen me many times just read around him. And I was like, oh, like, how did you come up with that? I missed it. I was coming at you, So tiny example, but I think just doing things side by side with your kid opens up a way of seeing them that's very different. And art is just a great way to do it.
And I appreciate that as an accessible like example, Jihii. Like even when you were starting to tell that, I was like, oh God, I can't sit down and make art with my kids. I just, it makes me uncomfortable. And like, I'm not an artist, but I can read, right? Or you could do a poem. Or last night we watched some Weird Al. And then we turned it off and we made a spoof song from the perspective of our new kitten about how much the older cat terrorizes her, to the tune of one of our favorite Charlie Puth songs. And like, that's creativity for me. I mean, honestly, I would do that as a job if that was available. And I don't know, your example is seeing it in other caregivers too. I'm like seeing you mirror that with your reading. I'm like, oh, I did did make art with my kids. So thank you for that. Well, before we let you go, you've given us so many great recommendations for kind of the world of caregiving and creativity. Do you have any other culture recommendations that you've been enjoying in your lives, with or without your children? Or in parallel?
Um, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is I just got back from a trip to New York and at the Museum of Art and Design. This is about
Oh, did
motherhood.
you go to this
Yes, it
exhibit?
just opened. It was awesome.
Do
It's
tell.
it's called
Christy and I have
Designing.
been thinking, could we get there before it closes in March?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
go
you
make your
do
pitch.
it. It's small, it's intimate. It's called Designing Motherhood. There's also a book. I don't know if you guys have covered it, but it's just like a history of the objects that have been designed to facilitate the process of motherhood from postpartum to toddlerhood and beyond. But it was just so fun to take a kid because it was the first time I've taken him to a museum where he recognized the objects. So there's like a wall of strollers from like the 50s to today, and he like tried to get in them. And then there's like toys, and he wanted to play with the toys. And there's high chairs, and he wanted to sit in the high chair. So it was just a really fun experience from that perspective, but also just to see like, oh, this is an industry that came up around motherhood, and I've never looked at it from the 30,000-foot view before, all in one room. So that was really fun. But you can also just get the book if you can't make it to New York. It's a really beautiful book called Designing Motherhood, and learn about these objects.
That's
so
a really beautiful
perfect.
image.
I have two things. I didn't think about it from the motherhood perspective, but I am reading a motherhood book right now. I am reading Danny McLean's book called We Live for the We, which
Wonderful
I think
book.
came out a few years ago. But what I
Mhm.
really like about it, because I'm really interested in the idea of individual to collective, it is so we oriented and collective oriented. And that's been really great. And then,
I've been courting her for the pod. You should
ooh,
know.
great. Let's work
Yeah.
on that. I would love to hear what she has to say. Um, and then the other thing, because Jihii mentioned doing something with her kid, I went to my first travel soccer tournament with my older child this weekend, which I had been feeling like was a big just obligation to travel, drive 2 hours away, stay in a hotel, like the whole thing.
Wow.
And it felt like a really big commitment. And um, in the end, he was really excited about the idea of staying in a hotel. And all of the parents on the team decided it was like because it's Halloween, everyone had like candy to give out in the room. So we decorated our room for kids to come in and give out candy. And, it's the most time we have spent alone together in I don't really know how long. Probably since he was like a little baby. It was just I have another kid, so and certainly yeah, it was just it was so cool to have the experience of having something that felt like an obligation turn into this like totally different thing. And we, watch TV like into the night and watch bad television together. And it was really, really sweet. So I'm really trying to hold the lesson of like, you just never know. You just never.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And, speaking of attention, one of your favorite topics, I do think I'm a big fan of like the way that your quality of attention changes if you have multiple children, with being one-on-one for
Yeah,
a long period of time with one of them, going on trips. And yeah, it just shifts things in this way that's always really interesting. Oh,
yeah.
thanks for that reminder. Well, I'm so grateful to you for being here. You can follow Christie on Substack, Practice Practice. Anywhere else that people should look you up, Christie, we will put the link to buy your book. It is a gorgeous book, really beautiful, something that you can pick up in small moments like a nap time and put down, or read cover to cover if you like.
Emergencywithcuriosity.com.
Great. Great. And Jihii, I know people can subscribe to your wonderful Substack, um, time spent. Anywhere else you'd like people to find you or your work?
No, that's probably the best place in this season of life.
And if people are interested in joining the Mothers in art and
course.
design community, is that local to the San Francisco Bay?
Yeah,
Is it?
it's San
Okay.
Francisco Bay Area, Mothers in Art and Design, sf.com, or, find me on Substack and message me. And it's a really lively WhatsApp group, even if you can't make it to the gatherings. And we're doing a bunch of fun projects in the future too. So always open to new people.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Mother of It All. And like my mom always said, you can exercise your attention without being a capital A artist.
The Mother of It All is produced by Opus Knox Media with music from It's Electric. If you like this episode, why not send it to a friend right now? Go on, we'll wait. You can follow us on Substack at themotherofitall.substack.com, where subscribing will get you episodes and bonus posts in your inbox and connect you with the Mother of It All listener community. Plus, become a paid subscriber and get a hot off the presses Mother of It All canvas tote. We're also on Instagram at The Mother of It All, and you can email us anytime with ideas or feedback at motherculturepod@gmail.com.